The sound came first, 3 hard knocks on aged wood, too polite to be a warning, too steady to be wind. Boone Calder stood at the stove, coffee blackening on the flame, hand frozen mid-stir. He'd gone near a year without visitors. The last one wore a badge. Left without it. Another knock followed, this one quicker, lighter, as though someone behind it had hesitated. The kind of knock you make when you're trying to survive, not just be let in. Boone stepped to the door and didn't open it right away. Just pressed a hand flat to the wood. He heard something on the other side, a breath, maybe 2. A girl whispered something he couldn't catch. Then silence. When he opened the door, dusk spilled across the porch like molasses. The sun hadn't set yet, but it had given up trying. 10 figures stood at the edge of the clearing, half-shadowed by scrub and willow. They weren't together in stance, scattered like the remains of something once whole. But they were all young. Worn boots, travel-stained skirts, and faces that looked back at him not with fear, but with waiting. "Is this your land?" the one in front asked. Her hair was copper and tangled. Her voice didn't quiver, but it wasn't strong either. "We ain't a skin, for forever. Just a place not burnin', for the night." Boone didn't speak. Just pushed the screen open wider and nodded once toward the barn. They moved like creatures afraid of sudden motion. The one who'd spoken, Maeve, he would learn, helped another girl hobble forward. Blood marked the inside of her stocking. One girl limped with her arm tied in a makeshift sling. Another carried a sack that jingled when she shifted, but it wasn't coin. It was tin spoons and a broken Bible. Boone followed them only long enough to swing the barn doors wide. The dog, a mutt named Scratch, stood on the porch and didn't bark. Just watched. Boone figured if the dog didn't raise a fuss, there was no danger worth fearing yet. The barn was dry. Not warm, not soft, but it didn't smell of blood or chains. That seemed to be enough. One girl, barefoot and freckled, touched the post near the hayloft like it was a church altar. Another dropped to her knees and just breathed deep. "Water?" Maeve asked. Boone pointed toward the pump. "It's clean. You'll have to prime it." She nodded. "No thanks. No story." Just took her place like she'd done this before, asked men for mercy and took only what they'd give. Back in the cabin, Boone stared into the fire until the coffee boiled over. He didn't sleep right that night. Every creak and shift in the wind made him tense. But nothing came. Only the sound of boots being taken off, girls crying softly into feed sacks, and the wind pressing against the walls like it meant something. He'd been alone for 5 winters. Not one had brought anything worth remembering. This one, maybe, just had. At dawn, the barn was quiet. Boone walked out with a bucket of warmed water and a loaf of hard bread. Left it just inside the barn doors and stepped back. He didn't knock. Didn't speak. One by one, they stepped into the light. Hair tied up. Faces scrubbed clean as they could manage. Maeve's sleeves were rolled past the elbow. She carried herself like a woman who had decided long ago never to beg again. "I'll mend your fence," she said. "Not a skin, for free bread." Boone chewed the inside of his cheek. "Fence's fine." She looked at him like she saw through that. "Then your windows." "I saw 2 with cracks." A pause. Boone gave the barest nod. "Glass in the shed." That's how it began. By midday, the girls had formed an unspoken rhythm. One swept the porch. One scrubbed the floor with a rag and soap made from pine ash. 2 were hauling wood like they'd done it every day since birth. Another sat on the stairs with Royson, the one with the stitched thigh, and told stories in a low Gaelic hum. They moved like sisters, but Boone saw the gaps. Not blood sisters. Survivors who'd had to become kin. Girls who flinched at slammed doors, who watched the sky like someone might fall from it. At the pump, Nora, small and brown-haired, eyes too wide, asked, "Are we staying just the night?" Boone didn't answer. He took the bucket from her and carried it in. She didn't follow. Just watched him walk, like she was trying to memorize the shape of safe. That evening, Boone sat on the porch, feet up, rifle resting near his boot. The sun was orange and low, slicing long shadows across the clearing. The girls sang while they cooked beans and flatbread in the skillet. Scratch wandered among them like he'd always belonged. They didn't ask for the house. Didn't ask for keys. Didn't ask who he was or what he'd lost. They just stayed close enough not to be alone. Maeve brought him a tin plate without looking him in the eye. "Should have salted it more," she said. "Tastes fine," he replied. "You'd say that even if it tasted like boot leather." Boone shrugged. "I've eaten boot leather." A silence passed between them, but it wasn't heavy. It was the kind you don't mind sitting in, like a warm coat over a cold shirt. That night, Boone walked out to the barn just to check. Just to see. He didn't carry a lantern. One of them had tied strings between the beams and hung scraps of cloth like little flags. Another had braided dried grass into makeshift pillows. Someone had left a buttoned vest folded neatly on the saddle rack. Not his. Probably found it in the dust and figured it should be used. There was a sound behind him. He turned. Maeve stood there with her arms folded, barefoot, skirt brushing the hay. "We'll go if you say," she said. Not pleading. Just tired. Boone stared at her a long time. "You fix those windows?" he asked. "3 of 'em. One more needs putty." He nodded once. "Then you're not done here." She blinked. The faintest break in her stillness. "You'll let us stay?" He didn't answer. Just turned and walked out. But he left the barn doors wide open behind him. Back in the house, he sat at the table with a piece of paper and a pencil stub. He didn't write anything. Just stared at the blank. Outside, the wind pressed against the cabin with more force than usual. Not angry. Just urgent. Later, after the fire burned low, Boone found something left on the porch rail. A braid of auburn hair tied with blue ribbon, too clean to be forgotten, too quiet to be a plea. He touched it with 2 fingers. Not to take it. Just to feel the proof that someone had meant to leave something behind, on purpose. He looked out toward the barn. There was a lantern still burning. And somewhere inside, a voice said softly, "Don't fall asleep yet. Just a few more stars." Boone didn't know which girl said it, but the sound settled under his ribs like a coal placed careful in an old hearth. Not bright, not hot. Just there. The sky stretched wide above, full of things it didn't explain. And the boy who had once built a ranch to keep everything out now stood on his porch, listening for footsteps that didn't come to take, but to stay. The first crack came in the form of a hoofbeat. Then another. Boone heard them long before they reached the ridge. Measured, official, too loud to be friendly. He stood at the porch rail with a rusted tin mug of yesterday's coffee, eyes tracking the dust curl rising in the west. 2 riders. Uniformed shapes. Sun behind them. Authority always arrived upright and unannounced. Scratch growled low from under the stairs. The girls didn't run, but Boone saw how quick they scattered, like crows knowing the sound of a shotgun. Maeve didn't move from where she was kneading dough on a wooden slab out by the garden. Her hands worked the same way they had before. But Boone noticed she hadn't taken a breath in over 10 seconds. The riders drew closer. Boone recognized one. Sheriff Luther Layton, wide-bellied and narrower-minded. The other wore violet. Miss Grindle, the preacher's sister, always in the saddle when there was moral smoke to sniff out. The 2 of them looked like justice and judgment riding double. Boone stepped down just as they pulled up. "Didn't know you were running an orphanage now, Calder," the sheriff said with a crooked grin. Boone didn't answer. His gaze stayed level, fingers still curled around the mug, the other hand near the rail, 3 inches from the rifle leaning there in plain sight. Miss Grindle's eyes roved the yard like a hawk hunting sin. 10 girls on one man's land. No priest. No law. Doesn't look right, does it? "They're not property," Boone said, voice flat as fence posts. "They're not prisoners either." "No papers," she sniffed. "No last names. Not even a church record." Maeve finally looked up. Dough on her hands. Dirt on her hem. Wind in her braid. "We've got names. We just stopped giving 'em to folks who don't care to use them." Grindle looked scandalized. Leighton just spat to the side and swung down from his saddle. You lettin' 'em sleep in the barn? Boone didn't flinch. It's dry. You lettin' 'em work your land? They offered. Grindle turned to the sheriff. You see it too, don't you, Luther? Filthy skirts. No kin. He's harboring indecency, not charity. Maeve folded the dough one last time and lifted it like a weight. We'd rather be indecent in a field than holy in a cellar. That set Grindle sputtering. The sheriff stepped closer. I've had complaints, Calder. Town wants to know what's happenin' up here. What you're hidin'. Boone's voice sharpened. What I'm not doin' is dragging women behind wagons. Or selling girls at auction. Maybe your town oughta ask itself where it got the right to judge mine. The wind stirred behind him. The girls had gathered near the cabin door, silent as shadows. Royson leaned against the frame, still limping, but chin raised. Nora clutched a broom like it was a weapon. Boone didn't have to look to know Maeve hadn't moved. She never did when it counted. Grindle's voice dropped cold. This ain't over. Charity don't spread its legs. Boone's hand tightened on the mug, and the old tin cracked. Leave. The sheriff climbed back into his saddle without another word. Miss Grindle turned to the girls and whispered something that sounded like a curse meant to rot the spine. Then they were gone, dust rising behind them like bad gossip. Afterward, no one spoke for a while. Then Maeve said, That dough's overproofed. Boone looked at her. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. Means the bread'll fall flat. Not worth much after that. Boone walked over, took the lump of dough and cut it in half with his boot knife. Handed her the better half. Bake it anyway, he said. Flat bread still fills a belly. By sundown, the scent of baking drifted out across the field. Sourdough and ash and a bit of cinnamon someone had found in the back of his pantry. The porch was swept, the fence mended, and someone had planted wildflowers by the barn without telling him. But Boone felt it in the air. A shift. Town eyes would be watching now. Judging. After dinner, he found Maeve on the porch rail, legs dangling. Why didn't you ask where we came from? She asked softly. He didn't look at her. Didn't matter. You really believe that? He took his time answering. I think hell has 100 names. Don't need to hear yours to know you crawled out of it. Maeve exhaled. It sounded like relief and grief braided into one breath. Quentin Doyle, she said finally. That's the name of the man who tried to sell us. Called it work. Called it salvation. Turned out, he just liked watching girls break. Boone nodded once. He from town. He's from money. She didn't cry. Just picked at a loose thread on her hem. We didn't run far enough. Boone stood. Walked to the edge of the porch and scanned the dark. Nothing moved. Just the creak of trees and a sky too wide for comfort. You stayin'? He asked. Maeve blinked. What? You gonna run again? She didn't answer at first. We've been running since Galway. Boone didn't ask where that was. He just stepped inside and left the door open. The next few days passed like a fever lifting. The girls didn't speak much, but their hands never stopped working. Boone came back from the North Ridge to find clean linens folded on his bed and the windows patched with waxed cloth and care. Scratch had taken to sleeping with his head in Nora's lap, and Royson laughed once, an actual sound, not just air in pain. One morning, Boone found a wooden spoon on the table, carved from his old fence post, painted with tiny flowers. On the handle, someone had etched, still standing. That same afternoon, the preacher's cart rolled past the edge of the property. He didn't stop, just stared too long and made the sign of the cross. Behind him, 3 boys pointed at the girls hanging laundry and whispered like sin had grown legs. Boone watched it all from the hill. That night, he took the long ride to town. Didn't say where he was going. Didn't ask permission. He stopped outside the old mercantile. Walked in. Bought nails, sugar, a bolt of muslin. Then asked one quiet question at the counter. That Doyle fella. He's still around. The storekeep hesitated. Might be. He drinks at the Calico. Still got hands in freight. Boone said nothing. Just paid and left. When he got back to the ranch, Scratch was waiting on the porch, tail still. The girls were inside, lanterns low, laughter like thin glass behind heavy doors. Boone stood for a long time, staring at the sky. When he stepped inside, Maeve looked up. You get what you needed? Boone said, Got a name. Her face didn't change, but her hands tightened on the cup. We'll have to leave again, she said quietly. Boone shook his head. Not this time. And for the first time since they arrived, Maeve looked afraid, not of him, but of what hope might mean. Before she could speak, Nora burst through the cabin door, face flushed. There's riders coming. Maeve froze. How many? 4. Boone reached for the rifle and stepped out onto the porch. Behind him, he heard the soft click of chairs being pushed back, feet hitting floorboards, hearts held in shared breath. In the fading light, 4 figures cut across the lower ridge. Boone didn't know yet whether they brought blood or salvation. But he did know one thing. The wind had changed direction. And this time, he wasn't going to stand alone. The sky had gone the color of spoiled cream, all yellow-gray and trembling. The kind of sky that hushed the animals and made the crows fly low. Boone Calder stood beside the porch post, one hand on the rifle slung across his shoulder, the other brushing against the wood like he could feel the storm in the grain. The girls stood in the doorway behind him, silent, back straight, their faces holding more questions than fear, but not by much. Nora clutched the hem of Maeve's apron. Royson leaned on the doorframe, jaw clenched, weight off her stitched leg. They're not town folk, Boone said, voice low, eyes fixed on the 4 approaching riders. Wrong clothes. Wrong gait. That lead horse, too clean for dust roads. Maeve stepped forward just enough to see past his shoulder. Her breath caught. That's Doyle's coat. Boone didn't ask how she knew. He could see it now, too. Long wool, dark with red lining, hanging like a judge's robe on the narrow shoulders of the man riding front. Quentin Doyle. He came like a man who'd never been told no in his life. Boots polished, chin high, grin carved crooked into his mouth like he wore it to mock silence. Behind him were 3 men, 2 younger, wide-backed, and armed. The third looked old and mean, eyes like cracked glass. Boone stepped off the porch as they reined in. The air snapped with thunder but gave no rain. Just tension, hot and dry. Well, Doyle said, sweeping his hat off and bowing low, voice syrupy. Didn't expect to find a boy like you playing house with my investment. Boone didn't move. They ain't yours. Doyle's grin widened. Funny thing that. I got contracts say different. Signatures. Witnesses. And the law, well, law's always been partial to paper, hasn't it? You want paper? Boone raised his rifle, barrel still low. You'll need to roll it up and eat it, 'cause it don't mean a damn thing here. The 2 men flanking Doyle shifted, hands drifting toward their hips. The old one stayed still, watching Boone with the dead calm of a man who'd seen too many fights and survived by watching who blinked first. Doyle laughed. Come now. You really gonna point a gun over 10 strays? Poor girls who probably whispered sweet things to you when the lights went out? I know what they do, Calder. I trained them myself. The porch creaked behind Boone. Maeve stepped down. No shoes. Dust on her feet. Hair loose. We're not trained dogs, she said. We walked here on torn soles and broken names. You don't own us anymore. Doyle looked her up and down, then chuckled. Maeve. You always had fire. That's why I charged more for you. Boone saw it then. Maeve's hand shook. Just a flicker. Enough. He raised the rifle to his shoulder. You need to turn around. Doyle's smile slipped. You sure you want to start this? Boone's voice stayed level. You stepped onto my land. Your name holds no weight here. Doyle clicked his tongue, disappointed. It's a shame. You had a good thing going. A ranch. A bit of kindness. Could have built a name. Boone's thumb moved to the hammer. Still can. Just not the one you thought. Lightning cracked somewhere distant, just enough to light the wide sky. The three men didn't move. But Boone saw it, uncertainty blooming in their eyes. Maeve didn't flinch. She stepped closer to Boone and took the rifle from his hands. Her fingers were clumsy, unfamiliar with the weight, but she didn't lower it. "I ain't lettin' you take us back," she said. "Not without a fight." Doyle's horse stamped once. "You don't have it in you," Boone whispered. "He's right. You don't." Maeve glanced at him, furious. "You think I can't shoot him?" "No," Boone said quietly. "I think you're better than him. You don't have to prove it with blood." Maeve's lip trembled, but she lowered the rifle. Just an inch. That's when Doyle reached for his revolver. Boone moved faster. Rifle up. One warning shot into the dirt, inches from Doyle's stirrup. The horses panicked. Doyle's men drew, but the old one barked, "Hold." And everything froze. The storm hadn't broken, but it loomed so close you could feel it in your teeth. Doyle's grin had slipped. Just a man now. Not a buyer. Not a god. Just a man with sweat under his collar. "You'll regret this," he spat. "No," Boone said. "I regret not putting men like you in the ground sooner." The old man finally spoke. "Let's go, Quentin." Doyle hesitated, long enough to show weakness, then yanked his reins and turned his horse. The others followed. No words. Just the beat of hooves fading toward the horizon. The girls didn't cheer. They didn't even breathe for a full minute. Then Nora whispered, "Did we win?" Maeve turned to Boone. "He'll be back." "I know." She handed him the rifle. Her hands were steadier now. Boone nodded to her. "You did good. I didn't shoot. You didn't need to." That night, the rain finally came. It swept in over the land like grace, slow, soaking, steady. The girls pulled their bedding into the cabin. Boone sat by the fire, steam rising off his shirt. No one spoke for a while. Just the pop of wood and the hush of water on roof. Royson stitched buttons back onto his coat. Nora braided a new ribbon for Scratch's neck. Maeve stood by the window, watching the storm like it was something sacred. "I used to pray for rain," she said, "when we were trapped. Thought if the sky broke open, maybe someone'd hear it. But it never came. Not until we ran." Boone didn't answer. He was watching her, really watching, like her words were nails holding something in place. Maeve turned to him. "Why did you help us?" He shrugged. "Didn't feel right not to." "That's not a reason. That's instinct." He looked down at the floorboards. "You reminded me what mercy looks like. What it costs." She stepped toward him, slow. "And what do you think it buys?" Boone met her eyes. "Time. Maybe peace." "Do you think we get peace, Boone?" His throat moved as he swallowed. "I think maybe we start to." Outside, the rain softened. The storm had passed. But the air still held its weight, like something unfinished, something waiting. Later, when the girls were asleep, Boone walked the perimeter of the ranch. Just him and the dog and the silence that followed survivors. Near the edge of the corral, he found something half buried in the dirt. A bit of torn paper. A corner of a contract. It had his land listed. His name, scratched out. Maeve's, faint and misspelled. The ink bled through the rain. He folded it once. Then again. Slipped it into his pocket. When he turned, Maeve stood behind him, barefoot in the mud. "You were right," she said. "'Bout what?" "We didn't run far enough." Boone nodded. "Then let's stop running." And just like that, he realized what they'd been building here wasn't just a refuge. It was a reckoning. They came just before dusk, 12 riders cresting the northern ridge like a sermon spoken in anger. Boone saw the first of them through the barn slats, fire catching on polished brass buttons, rifle barrels slung proud. The lead rider held a torch even before the sun was gone, as if the burning had already been decided. Scratch barked once, then growled. Low. Boone stepped out slow, wiping his hands on a rag, muscles already tensing like rope drawn taut. The air smelled of ash, faint and familiar. They hadn't come to talk. Maeve met him by the well. Her hands were flour-dusted, her apron stiff with dried dough. "They're not hiding it anymore," she said, eyes on the fire's tip. Boone nodded once. "They mean to finish it." She didn't ask if they should run. That season had passed. From the porch, the girls watched in silence. Royson's limp hadn't healed right, but she carried herself tall. Nora clutched the Bible they found behind the stove, its pages brittle, but still legible in the right light. The rest stood beside them, hair tied back, dresses mended, shoes not matching but laced tight. There was no more fear in them, only resolve. The riders didn't stop at the gate. They came straight through. Boone stepped forward as the torches fanned out. "Sheriff," he said, voice even. Leighton looked down from his saddle. His face was flushed with drink or power, it didn't matter which. "You were warned. I remember. Still got the girls here. Still feeding 'em. Still acting like this is a mission, not a scandal. They're people, not livestock." Leighton's lip curled. "They're trouble. Town doesn't want 'em. Church doesn't claim 'em. And you, what are you now, Calder? A saint? A savior?" Boone looked over his shoulder at the cabin. "Just a man. A man who decided not to look away." Grindle rode up next, face tight with righteousness. "They're corrupting this land. Their presence is an insult. Every loaf you break with them mocks the decency of this town." Maeve stepped forward then, not hiding, not apologizing. "That's funny," she said, "because we learned how to bake from your own sister, ma'am. The one who taught at the mission before you turned it into a cage." Grindle's eyes narrowed. "I should have known you'd crawl back out of the mud." Maeve lifted a small, wrapped bundle. A still warm loaf. The smell reached even the horses. "We made this morning," she said. "Flour, salt, milk. That's all. It doesn't carry sin. Only hands do that." Leighton spat. "This is your last chance. You give them up, send him down the road, or we'll burn what's left of your pride with your barn." Boone's voice dropped, heavy. "You do that, you'd better make peace with what happens next." The sheriff signaled to the men. They spread wide, torches lifted. And then, from the far side of the fence, a new voice cut in. "She told me what he did." The riders turned. An older woman in dark skirts walked out of the trees, silver hair braided down her back. Mrs. Doyle, Quentin's mother, long thought too silent, too gone to care. "I saw the contracts," she said. "My son forged them. Sold girls like stock. And this man." She pointed to Boone. "He gave them bread. My boy gave them blood." Grindle snapped. "You're grieving. Deluded. I'm not the one calling torches holy." Behind her came two more figures. Old Henry from the feed store, and Mathis, the half-deaf tanner who'd once turned a blind eye to a girl's scream. They stood beside her, eyes lowered but present. Boone didn't lower his rifle. "This is your choice," he said. "Turn back. Or cross this fence and make your own hell." Leighton shifted in his saddle. "You'd kill for them?" "I'd live with myself if I did." The wind picked up. It blew ash from a nearby pit fire into the air, embers swirling between two sides of something ancient. Grindle looked toward the girls. She saw their silence, their steadiness. She saw that not one of them had begged. "You think you've built a sanctuary here," she hissed. "This won't last." Maeve looked her dead in the eye. "Neither will your grip." A moment hung, stretched like a wire about to snap. Then Leighton cursed, turned his horse, and kicked it hard down the hill. The rest followed, torches dropping one by one into the dust. The fire never touched the house. When they were gone, Boone exhaled for the first time in minutes. He turned to the girls, but they were already moving. Royson began clearing the scattered kindling. Nora fetched water. Maeve broke the loaf in half and handed him a piece. He took it. The crust cracked under his thumb. And for the first time in years, he smiled. That night, no one spoke of leaving. The girls slept in the house, 3 to a bed, others curled near the hearth like sisters born in another life. Boone stayed on the porch, rifle beside him, dog at his feet, stars coming out like truth after a long silence. Maeve stepped out before dawn, shawl pulled tight, and stood beside him without asking. "What now?" she asked. Boone looked out toward the hills. "Now we stay." She smiled softly. "Even if they come again, we'll still have bread in our hands." And somewhere, far off but real, a bell rang once. Not for death. For mourning. Which city are you watching our video from? Please leave a comment. Please subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you.